An important tool in financial management is the ability to measure whether or not you are meeting your financial goals. One way that we can do this in CenterPoint is by creating a budget and then using financial reports such as the income statement or balance sheet to compare actual to budget information. To start a budget, we can go to Setup and Budgets, or we could go to Reporting Tools and Budgets. Both take us to the same place. The Open Budget screen will be what comes up, and if you have any existing budgets, you'll see them on the list, and to open them, you just have to highlight them and click OK. But it does have a new button to create a new budget. Before I create a new budget, I want you to notice that I have two existing budgets. Those two budgets are for different areas of my business. One is for my cattle operation and the other one is for my crops. I'm now going to create a budget that is for the entire company, for all parts of the company. So I'm going to click New, and we're going to call this 2025 CP Farms. Now, I did put the year 2025 on it. That happens to be the year that I'm budgeting for, but you don't necessarily have to have that year in the title because your budget could span more than 1 year. And actually, if I create this budget this year, I could come back to it next year and extend it out an additional year. It's up to you which way you want to go with that. You can only budget for one company at a time, so even though I have two companies, I'm budgeting right now for CenterPoint Farms. You'll need to choose your date range, and like I said, it doesn't have to be just 1 year. Mine does happen to be just 1 year, but you can extend it for a longer period. When we click OK and the budget reports come up, there's going to be 3 reports. There's going to be a flow of funds, a balance sheet, and an income statement. Because of the balance sheet, we need to have some beginning values on the balance sheet. So even if you aren't going to be budgeting for a balance sheet activity, you do need to at least select a beginning period for the balances on the balance sheet. I'm going to choose December of 2024. Now, likely if I'm putting in a 2025 budget, I might be doing that earlier than December of 2024. It's okay that I still choose December of 2024 as I keep updating CenterPoint with actual transactions. It'll keep updating the actual balances in my budget. When the reports come up, all of the accounts will be listed on the left side of the report. They won't have any account numbers on them, and they'll be in alphabetical order. If I want them to include account numbers, I could say that I want to include account numbers, and then I have the choice of whether or not I want to sort them by account number or account name. You can set one budget as the default budget for a company. And what that does for you is as if you were running one of our regular income statements or budgets, or balance sheets, and you wanted to include budget information on it. If you don't select a budget, the system is going to automatically use the default budget for that company. Okay, but you can select a budget on those reports. So as soon as I make this one the default budget for this company, any previous budget that had been marked as the default budget will now be unchecked. Obviously, since this is a new budget, I want to make it active, but later, maybe next year, when I create next year's budget, maybe I don't want this one to be active anymore, so I could come back to this property screen and take that active status out. At the bottom of the screen, I have the ability to import other budgets into this budget. So for the budget that I'm creating, it's going to be for the whole company, but I've already put in budget figures for my cattle operation and my crops operation, so I don't want to have to duplicate my entry. Instead, I could import those in. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to import in my cattle budget, and I'm going to add my crops budget. Later, if I make changes to those two budgets, and I want those changes to be reflected in this budget, I would come back to this property screen, highlight the budget, and click the Update button. It's not enabled right now because there haven't been any changes made to those reports. Before I click OK, which will draw up the budget, I'm going to go to the Entry Mode tab. You do need to pick an entry mode. The default entry mode is Use Account Entry Mode. Okay, there's really, though, 3 entry modes. That one's not actually an entry mode in itself. There's really 3 entry modes. The first entry mode is Journal Entry Offset to Cash. And what that means is that every entry you make into the budget is going to automatically be offset to cash. So if you put in a $100 utility expense, it'll increase that expense and it's going to decrease cash. If you put in a $12,000 increase to an operating loan, it's going to increase that liability, but it's also going to increase my cash. So it's automatically offset to cash. You would use this method if you were looking for a budgeted balance sheet, or if you were at least just wanting to monitor your cash levels throughout your budget activity. The second option is Open Entry. With Open Entry, there is no offset, so that if I put in a $100 increase to utilities expense, it doesn't affect any other account. You could use this method if you weren't worried about monitoring your cash levels or having a budgeted balance sheet. This third entry is a little more complicated, and it's not likely that you would want to enter in an entire budget in this mode. Some entries, when you're doing your regular data entry, involve more than just 2 accounts. As an example of that might be the sale of some sort of inventory, whether it was purchased inventory or raised inventory. That's not only going to increase the revenue account and increase your bank account, but it also is going to decrease a inventory, and it'll offset that with the inventory offset account. Okay, so there might be 4 accounts involved in that. CenterPoint does that using something called a template in your regular data entry so that you don't have to do all the calculation of what amount you need to reduce the inventory by. Okay, CenterPoint budgeting can use that same method if you choose detailed transaction entry. It can use that same template in your budget entry. Okay, so you might have some accounts that you want to use detailed transaction entry for. Well, that's what the 4th mode is for. If I use account entry mode, then I can select a different entry mode on an account by account basis. And you can learn about that in the video on how to enter in values into your budget. Okay, but that's what that method is for. So most people will choose the Use Account Entry mode. By default, most accounts are set to Journal Entry Offset to Cash when using this mode. If you choose Account Entry mode, Journal Entry Offset to Cash, or Detailed Transaction Entry, the system will ask you for a bank account to offset those transactions to. I've chosen my First National Bank. Okay, but I can come back to this property screen and change it to another bank for some entries if I need to. If I choose Open Entry as my entry mode, then it's going to gray out the bank account field because it's not making any adjustments to the bank account. Okay, I'm going to go back to just account entry mode. At the bottom of the screen are some entry defaults. Now, these are used when you're entering in your budget figures. If I did something like set my profit center to corn, for example, and then clicked OK and got into my budget, while that property is set to corn, every entry that I put in is going to automatically be allocated to corn. Okay, so you can learn about how to use these details to get those management details into your budget transactions in a separate video. For now, I'm going to click OK and let it draw up the budget. And you'll see the 3 reports as separate tabs at the bottom of the screen. So I have the flow of funds, the balance sheet, and the income statement. Now, the flow of funds and the income statement have values on them because I imported the crops and the cattle budgets in, and you can see those values. Otherwise, these would all be 0. The balance sheet has values on it because I said to start out with beginning values for December of 2024, but then that activity from my crops and my cattle budget also adjusted some of these amounts as well. Okay, now I'm ready to begin entering in the rest of my budget or preparing this to send it out to an Excel spreadsheet where I can put in my budget figures and then re-import that information back in. Both of those methods are discussed in separate videos. If you need to get back to that properties screen where we set those properties, you can go to File and Properties, and then you would be able to make any changes you needed to this properties screen. I'm going to click Cancel, and then to exit out of budgeting, I could click on the X in the top right corner.